What's up? Reveal day. The first, I mean, honestly, the first real reveal day. I'm having trouble seeing you. Can you move the camera closer? All right, I got you, fam. How's this? Any second now. Pick your guys' picks. Who are we getting today? I mean, we don't know if we're, you know, I'm gonna be honest. There's a good chance we're not actually getting a champion. We're probably just getting some support cards. But whose support cards are we getting? All right, guys, here we go. The full reveal is happening. These are the 6 champions we know we're getting for sure in this expansion overall. Ziggs, Viger, Senna, Scion, Caitlyn, and Xerath. Let's go ahead, refresh the page, and see whose support cards we're getting today. Here's a link to one of the reveal sites, Dak.gg. Wait a second, is this real? This is a lot of cards. Okay, hang on. Wait, enhance? Okay. This changes everything. All right, the reveals are here on one of the sites. Aloof Travelers, a Yordle. When I'm summoned, draw both players draw 1, then your opponent discards their highest card cost. This is a 4-mana 3/4, and it's a Bandle City PNZ card. So right away we can see that there's going to be more cards in, like, you know, the Bandle City area that are both regions. All right, amazing. I'm gonna kind of like, I'm just gonna read them out for now, and then I'll go back later and do a second sweep. Then we've got Ava Achiever, a 6-mana 4/4 Yordle Bandle solo. When I'm summoned and round end, plant 3 poison Puffcaps on random cards in the enemy deck. Traps on enemy cards are doubled when activated. Holy shit. So they might actually be making more kinds of traps. For those of you guys who don't know, the poison Puffcaps are trap category cards. They might be adding like Caitlyn traps that also get shuffled into your deck. Lecturing Yordle, a 4-mana 3/5 Yordle. When I'm summoned or attack, create a fleeting poison dart in hand. And the poison dart is down here. I'm covering it up right now. It's 1 mana slow. Deal 1 to anything and plant 3 poison Puffcaps on random cards in the enemy deck. Oh, Jesus. All right, so we're getting some real Teemo support. Holy shit. Puffcap Pup. A 2-mana 2/2. When it strikes, plants 3 Puffcaps on random cards in the enemy deck. And again, these ones are just like solo Bandle cards. This one's the first one that's not a Yordle. Then we've got Swole Scout. You guys heard of Swole Squirrel? Swole Squirrel. Now we've got Swole Scout. 4-mana 3/2. When I'm summoned, if you've added 2+ cards to your hand this round, grant me +1 attack and elusive. Woo! Ah, that's what I like to see, baby. This is degeneracy at its finest. Holy shit. All right, Yordle Newbie, 3-mana 3/2. When I'm summoned, if you've added 2+ cards to your hand this round, grant me +1/+2. So it's effectively a conditional 3-mana 4/4. This one's probably not going to be amazing. I think 3-mana 4/4s are actually kind of overrated. See Kahiri, the little 3-mana 4/4. But this is interesting. It looks like they have an archetype of if you've added 2+ cards to your hand this round. So they basically, it's sort of like a create archetype. They can combine with like create cards. It's like create or draw, I guess. Then we've got these cards, which are entrapments. Wait, what? Oh, it's just this first one. So this is the main deckable one. Entrapment, a 2-mana burst speed Bandle card. Pick 1 of 3 units or spells from the enemy deck and plant 3 poison Puffcaps on all copies of it. Ooh, that's kind of interesting. That's kind of cute. So you can actually choose which cards to trap. It'll plant a total of 9 Puffcaps. Presumably, if you pick something that they have 3 copies of. So the cool thing about Entrapment, the very cool thing about Entrapment, is basically a lot of people, when they first read this card, they're going to be thinking that the way to maximize Entrapment's value is to try to pick something that you don't want the opponent to draw, and that's not true. How Entrapment is going to work is you're going to want to do a little hand reading, which is really, really cool. You're going to want to simply maximize the amount of damage you're getting from Puffcaps in most cases, which means you need to kind of know a little bit about the opponent's deck and a little bit about the opponent's hand to be able to predict what card they're most likely to have most copies additionally of in their deck that you see from Entrapment, so that you can go for the full 9 Puffcaps, right? Which is really cool. I really like that. And of course you can pick a spell or a unit depending on the opponent's deck and depending on your hand read. So there's actually like a surprising amount of thought behind like how to play this card. And of course, it's really good against things that have more additional copies, like weird counterfeit copy style things. All right, next we've got Sump Fumes. Dude, we got so much today. Sump Fumes. Deal 2 to a unit. This is a PNZ card, a 3-mana PNZ card. Deal 2 to a unit. If you've added 2+ cards to your hand this game, deal 3 to it instead. Or sorry, this round, deal 3 to it instead. Wow. So it's sort of like a gotcha, except it's got a completely different requirement. It's a conditional deal 3 to a unit, but it's 3 mana if you've added 2+ cards to your hand this round. It's not going to be that hard to enable. The inability to go face will be a little limited, but this card's really not bad. Like anything that's going to be able to target a unit like that is pretty solid. I would say overall it's kind of like comparable to Gacha. Like it's not going to be better than Get Excited, but there will be decks where this finds a home for sure. Like removal is removal, and it does have a unique requirement for turning on that removal. Stinky Wump. 1 mana 2/1, last breath, create a copy of me in the enemy deck with 2 poison Puffcaps attached. Stinky Wump. What the fuck? All right, that is honestly not bad. So it's kind of like a Pesky Spectre. Of course, it's a 1 mana 2/1 stat line, and sometimes you're just gonna deal 2 additional damage to your opponent, right? Think of it sort of like kind of like a Legion Grenadier. It can create a copy of itself, and it sometimes deals 2 damage. So the odds of them drawing the Puffcap are going to depend on a lot of factors. But if they're drawing a lot of cards, like this is actually kind of annoying. And again, this is a PNZ card. So I'm thinking like, you know, like a Teemo Ezreal style deck might be able to use this. Because just the ability to have just like a cheap unit that can block down against aggro, like Teemo Ezreal is really weak against aggro. Having like a 1 mana 2/1 against aggro that can block turn 1 is really, really nice. And of course, you know, you're forcing them to draw a lot with Hexcore and potentially Veteran Investigator. So this will often just be a 2 damage. Like that's really not bad. It's really, really not bad. All right, so these are really cool reveals. We got a lot today. Now I need to actually like go through these and kind of evaluate how good I think they're gonna end up being. Really quickly, of course, because this is still initial impressions, but these are kind of weird cards to evaluate. Like, especially, I mean, they're playing for a kind of archetype that we haven't really seen before. They're kind of, some of them are going deeper for like the Puffcap archetype, and some of them are playing for this weird, if you've added 2+ cards to your hand this round archetype, which you can combine with a lot of things, right? Like most of the added 2+ cards to your hand this round archetype are Bandle cards. We've got Swole Scout and Yordle Newbie. We're also seeing 1 in PNZ here, Sump Fumes, but it'll work with anything that creates cards, right? Like let's say like Blade Fragments, right? Like anything that creates cards in your hand, you'll be able to trigger these really easily. So it's sort of similar to the created cards archetype, right? Like Victor's kind of like created cards archetype, or like gems kind of thing, or invokes. Yeah, there's a lot of like crossover between those two things. It should work with draw. Based on the phrasing, I'm guessing it works with draw, but that begs the question: does it work with the draw that you have at the start of the round? That's a little weird. Daring Poro, yeah, Daring Poro is Poro Cannon in particular is really, really, really good for these, because all you need to do is a single Poro Cannon, and that'll turn on something like Sump Fumes or any of your cards. Like just play Poro Cannon, and these cards are immediately enabled for 0 mana, for 0 actions, for basically 0 cost. So yeah, no, I mean, PNZ definitely has some really, really good crossover into this, and some Fumes is really good to enable as well. Ballistic Bot, yeah, Ballistic Bot will activate this. I think for the most part, this is going to be a really easy effect to trigger. Now, I do think that, you know, Swole Scout could definitely have some potential there, but Yordle Newbie doesn't really have as much. Although we still don't have anything that interacts with a Yordle tag. We're seeing a bunch of cards that have the Yordle tag, especially like all the cards that all the champions that we had were retroactively fitted with the Yordle tag. We have no idea what it's used for yet, so we don't know how valuable it's going to be. But for the most part, you know, taking it from the top again, Aloof Travelers, I don't even know what to think about this card. Your opponent discards their highest cost card. I mean, that's pretty decent. Like, that's pretty solid. It can definitely be something that's good into certain kinds of archetypes. It looks pretty solid. Yeah, for sure. It's basically like a draw card Kind of like a clunky stat line, but it's kind of like a draw one, except your opponent cycles a card. If you're playing like a Puffcap deck, that's a good thing for you, that your opponent is forced to cycle a card, and you can definitely try to play it at a specific time that will target something that they were gonna do. And it can discard champions too. So yeah, no, this Aloof Traveler seems pretty good. Like this actually seems, I'm not a big fan of like the 4 mana 3/4 stat line in general. I think this is a more useless stat line than it seems. Like on turn 4 of the game, you don't want to go negative in tempo with a unit. That's almost always never really worked in Runeterra, but this is a really strong effect. I actually think Aloof Travelers has a ton of potential. Ava Achiever. So yeah, it's basically, it's a really scary finisher for like a Puffcap style deck. There's one slight issue, which is we don't know how well Puffcaps will work in Bandle, right? Now, we're going to have to see. Currently, people that are running Puffcaps are running Freljord for like the, you know, amount of cheap spells. That's like an Ezreal Teemo style deck. And we'll have to see a lot of like cheap spells in Bandle that actually work for the archetype to make it better than that. And to be honest, we're not exactly sure how well that'll work, but from what I've seen, I haven't really seen anything from Bandle that would be better than what Freljord has. Because you do definitely need to like stall the opponent a little bit, and Bandle doesn't, I don't know if Bandle has much of an ability to do that. So I'm not 100% sure if Avachiever will be good, but if there is a Puffcap archetype that does go into Bandle, that'll be really nice. And also, again, it says traps on enemy cards are doubled when activated. It's holding like little Caitlyn traps in its hands. I mean, presumably there will be other kinds of traps. Like, this is basically confirmation that there will be other kinds of traps, presumably Caitlyn traps, and it will have some implications there too. But overall, it's really unique, so it has a lot of potential if Caitlyn traps do something big, or if Bandle Teemo ends up being a thing. Lecturing Yordle, and this is more of like the Puffcap. So again, this is kind of the same as Avachiever. Same with Puffcap Pup. Like all three of these cards are just like Bandle Puffcap cards. Bandle Puffcaps might be good. I think they're, I mean, we literally just have to wait and see what the other Bandle Puffcap support is going to be. The thing that kind of concerns me about Bandle Puffcaps, and again, we haven't seen the cards yet, so I have no idea, but Puffcaps wants to be kind of a slower deck. It's really important to be stalling out the opponent's game plan while you're kind of like setting up Puffcaps. Like if you take a look at like where and Teemo Ezreal deck is right now, Freljord gives it some really important tools, the stall ones, right? Like not only are you combining that with Puffcap Peddler, which you're already running in a Puffcap deck, so Freljord has a lot of cheap spells, but Freljord's cheap spells do a really good job of stalling out the game. And when you remove those, when you try to play this archetype, trying to shuffle Puffcaps in more aggressively instead of slowing down the opponent's strategy, that can get a lot worse. So what they need, and they could be good, we don't know, but what Bandle needs to support this archetype is cards that will slow the pace of the game down. We haven't really seen those yet. So that's going to be the big decider of whether like Puffcap Bandles make sense, is whether they have a way to actually slow the game down. It could be Bandle City Freljord. Now that's the interesting thing, because Teemo is Bandle, so it could be Bandle Freljord. It's definitely possible, you know, like that's 100%. You know, you could get out of the PNZ cards, because Veteran Investigator and Hexcore Foundry, you do draw from the opponent. You lose Puffcap Peddler, which is definitely really sad. But honestly, if there's enough support in Bandle to make up for it, I could see that. I mean, Aloof Travelers, you're running in Bandle even without PNZ, so maybe that's the direction. Maybe Bandle Freljord. It's definitely, I think, a really interesting direction. And yeah, all these Puffcap cards are kind of like lumped in the same way because of that, I think, for sure. Lecturing Yordle looks pretty great to me, in particular if you're actually using like spell synergy, because the poison darts will be really nice. Swole Scout, this one is just like a basically conditional elusive. It's just like potentially a 4 mana 4/2 elusive, which has strong vibes of some Snipe Scavenger, basically. Oh yeah, they buffed this to 3 health at some point. Yeah, nobody plays this card for the most part. I don't know. For 4 mana, it might still be a little too expensive, because it only just goes to a 4/2 elusive. It's a conditional elusive, but you're not really gaining as much power off that condition. So, I mean, we know Bandle will have some strong elusive cards, and the thing is, any card that says the word elusive can really only be so bad. Like, an elusive deck will always be a thing, and they'll always want to run more elusive cards. Take, for example, a card that a lot of people underrate, Yusari. I think a lot of people literally just don't... Okay, I forgot how to spell that like 5 times. I think a lot of people literally don't remember that Yusari was run in like 4 competitive decks in the past. Like, Yusari has been run competitively a lot before. Like it's a solid card. It's not good. It's not like a staple of mainstay long-term competitive play. It's fringe, but it's not a bad card. The reason it's not a bad card is really simple. It says the word elusive on it. Like in metas where elusive keyword is premium, and if you're playing an elusive deck and you're trying to devalue your chump blockers, you're literally gonna just vomit elusives into your deck, right? And what that means is the elusive keyword can really only be so bad. It's kind of contingent on the region that it's in, but in this case, like Swole Scout, I don't think is a premium elusive, but in a lot of cases it will be ran just for that sweet elusive tag if there's no better options. Although it's kind of looking like Bandle City might have better options. Yordle Newbie, like I said, a 3 mana 4/4 is pretty overrated. 3 mana 4/4 has almost never been good in Runeterra. Even when Badger Bear existed, it was a very different time, because Badger Bear used to be a 3 mana 4/4, and it was decent, but it wasn't as good as people thought. Most of the reason it was good was because Ranger was also 4 attack, and even like before it got nerfed, people were already starting to cut it for LoR and Protege, even when it was a 4/4. But people kind of forget that, so a lot of people have this weird impression that a 3 mana 4/4 was nuts, and B, they extrapolate and think it's still nuts. 3 mana 4/4 is not really great in a lot of metas. So it comes down to a lot of things, but I don't expect this card to be nuts. Like even if you want the Yordle tag, even if you have an easy time enabling this, it's probably not going to be the best option. Entrapment, like I said, I really like Entrapment. It's really cool. I mean, you can plant up to 9 Puffcaps, which is potentially pretty powerful. Although I think that even with this, like as cute as it is, for a 2 mana without a body, you might be better off doing something else. Like even when you compare it to Puffcap Pup is looking like it will be better in a lot of cases. Like having a body is a really big deal. Entrapment versus Go Hard, yeah, that's kind of that's the funniest one. If Go Hard ever comes back into the meta, like Entrapment versus Go Hard actually just screws them so hard. You just pick spells, because you'll have your choice of unit or spells. So you pick spells and it'll draw 3 spells from the deck. One of them will pretty much be Go Hard, and then you just put 3 Puffcaps on all copies of Go Hard. Like that's pretty hilarious. All right, Poison Dart. Another thing that's really interesting here is Poison Dart, even though it's summoned off of Lecturing Yordle, this is main deckable. You can see there's a gem here, right? Poison Dart is not a token card. You can put this in your deck if you want. It's basically kind of like a parlay if you think about it. 1 mana slow, 1 deal 1 to anything, same as parlay, except instead of if you kill a unit, deal damage to the Nexus, it's plant 3 Puffcaps on random cards in the enemy deck, which is really not bad. Again, like Bandle wants to be able to slow down games. You want to be able to survive turn 1 against aggressive decks. Poison Dart will be competitive. It will be a bit meta dependent. I would say that for a card like this, you can say it's reliably going to hit competitive decks, but in a meta dependent way. If you want to be able to slow down a metagame with a lot of aggressive 1 health units, and you're running a Puffcap deck, then you'll slap Poison Dart in your deck in some way, right? In the same way that like some decks just like run parlay if they want like the plunder triggers and it helps against aggro. Like Poison Dart might not be like a 3 of, but it's the kind of card that provides something really unique. Bandle probably needs more of this kind of effect, and I'm really happy that this is main deckable actually. Some Fumes I think is pretty low key. I think a lot of people will compare it to like Get Excited or Gotcha. The thing is, removal with a unique condition will always make sense in some cases. So I don't think those comparisons are fair. Like if you're in a meta where you just want like a potential 3 mana deal 3 and you have a lot of enablers for this, it could easily be better than Gotcha. And you know, maybe you're already maxed out on Get Exciteds, or maybe you don't want to, maybe you don't have discard fodder, or you just want to play for the control. You don't need the flexibility of going face. Some Fumes isn't bad. I don't expect it to be like an auto slot in or anything, and it'll be a little bit meta dependent, but it provides something unique. That's the thing about like evaluating cards. If it provides something that unique, it's like Poison Dart, right? In a certain meta, a reactive card like this is going to be something that you'll eventually want, right? And that's fine. And then Stinky Wump looks pretty good to me. I don't think this card is like is nuts. There's kind of one very specific problem with Stinky Wump. I like Stinky Wump as a card. I think it's pretty great. The one problem with Stinky Wump is that it's a PNZ card, and if you're going for a PNZ Puffcap strategy, what that's going to mean is basically you are going to want to be deep in Puffcap Peddler pretty much, because Puffcap Peddler is kind of how PNZ Puffcaps are able to work. And in a Puffcap Peddler deck, you usually want to be sending to spell mana or playing Teemo on turn 1, right? Stinky Wump doesn't really fit either of those strategies very well because you're not banking spell mana for Peddler. You could think about running him in like a pure burn deck, but when you compare him to like Legion Saboteur, for example, I mean, Saboteur will kind of always get at least 1 damage in. Stinky Wump, even in the longer game, it's just shuffling a 1 of that deals 2, and the odds of it hitting are definitely less than half, so it's quite a bit worse than something like a Legion Saboteur. It's not bad. It's a 1 mana card with a really unique function. And it's in a region that wants more 1 mana cards. So if PNZ wanted to build an aggro deck outside of Noxus, then suddenly Stinky Wump will be hitting those decks. And that's a really, really big deal because PNZ hasn't really been able to build like early aggressive unit based decks without Noxus. In fact, you could say that the literal only reason that Noxus is the king of aggro. Why did I just type Noxus into the search? That's not how anything works. You could say that the only reason why Noxus is kind of like the king of aggro decks is because they own all the aggressive 1-drops, like almost all of them. It's so hard to build an aggro deck without good 1-drops, and because Noxus has Rearguard, Saboteur, and Precious Pet. And even, I mean, there's a lot of like aggressive decks that can use things like Blade Square. Okay, Thrasher is not really aggressive. That one would be a stretch. But basically, they have a lot of 1-drops, and not a lot of regions have a lot of good 1-drops, right? Bilgewater probably has the second most, by the way, which is like, it really goes to show. And everything else kind of gets screwed on 1-drops. It's really hard to make like an early aggro deck without either Bilgewater or Noxus. And what that means is this card is going to be at least somewhat of a big deal just because it gives PNZ more of an ability to run aggressive early curve decks without being in Noxus, and that matters quite a bit. So yeah, overall, Stinky Wump, I think it might make more sense in those aggressive style decks rather than a like raw Puffcap deck, but it's not bad. And of course, it's still Puffcaps, so it still has synergy with Teemo, right? You're still leveling up Teemo faster, you're still redoubling the Puffcaps. Teemo creates new Puffcaps. It will double the amount of Puffcaps by creating new ones when it is leveled, which is really, really strong. Teemo is a great card, and Teemo has actually always been a little bit underrated. He's lacked a bit of support in the past. I can tell you right now, Teemo is going to be nuts. Like, Teemo is going to be crazy. All of these cards we've seen, I don't know, like, you're probably not going to use all of them. You might not use Entrapment. You might not use Lecturing Yordle. Who knows? But just with a tiny bit more support, which he's getting a lot of support here, Teemo is actually going to be completely crazy. Just with like Stinky Wump and Poison Dart. Poison Dart in like a burn style deck looks a little gross. So I'm thinking, yeah, the most potential thing we can do with this is build some kind of like Teemo burn. It could be, I don't know what regions it would be. It could be Bandle Noxus. That would be interesting. PNZ Noxus. It could be, you know, PNZ Freljord or Bandle Freljord, but there's going to be some kind of Teemo burn deck. There's going to be multiple that are very, very good because Teemo, like, even before you level him up, he's a really powerful card. He never really had like the support he needed before. Like when you look at Teemo, his first form is really good, and when he levels up, it's like basically game winning for free. His first form is solid on its own. Like, it doesn't really need to be better than this. A 1-mana 1/1 elusive that plants Puffcaps is already fine. It's not amazing, but it's fine. And when you can level him reliably, this card gets nuts. The reason Teemo was kind of being limited before, and he was always underrated, he's not a bad card. Again, Teemo Ezreal has been very competitive in multiple times in the past, and we've had like Teemo Burn make a lot of sense. But he's always been a little bit lacking because mostly the Puffcap cards kind of suck. Like Clump of Wumps was not a good card. Like when you compare Clump of Wumps to the new one, the little pupper, Puffcap Pup is quite a bit better, right? Unless you're using this for discard fodder, which defeats the entire purpose of the Teemo synergy, right? Peddler was kind of the only good synergy card, but that restricted him into Freljord, which is a lot more niche. Now Teemo has so much more support, and I think honestly the biggest one is Poison Dart. Poison Dart is crazy. Poison Dart is nuts the more I look at it. But even, yeah, Stinky Wump maybe, and maybe even like Puffcap Pup or Lecturing Yordle or even Ava Achiever. The point is Teemo is looking really, really crazy. Like, Teemo's been a powerful card held back by support cards, and people are about to realize the true power of Teemo. Like honestly, this is looking a little bit disgusting to me. There's so many ways to build this too, because Teemo is either a PNZ or a Bandle card. So off the top of my head, the first thing I'm thinking about is the first week of the expansion, there's going to be like multiple Teemo decks flying around for sure. And like, there's going to be one Teemo deck that will eventually be pretty good. Like whatever ends up being the most refined, will have to be a pretty good deck, you know, at least tier 2 at the very least. All right, but yeah, that's my initial impressions. Overall, some pretty sweet reveals today. I'm glad we got so many cards. This is actually really crazy. What do you guys think? Anything we missed? Am I crazy, or does Ava Achiever kind of look like you? Come on, man. Like, bro. Let me put on the Teemo hat. You guys really think that looks like me? New profile pic. Oh, god damn it. I'm seeing a little bit of a resemblance.